Hello, I'm Ragioma and this is Witness. During the 50-year period known as the Cold War, the threat of a nuclear conflagration seemed very real. The doomsday clock was used to measure how close we as a planet were to annihilation. In the United States, school children were regularly drilled on what to do in the event of a nuclear explosion. In major cities and small towns, underground shelters mushroomed, becoming major additions to American homes. But as more and more people got used to living with the nuclear threat, shelters appeared pointless. After all, who'd want to survive nuclear Armageddon? With the collapse of the Soviet Union, it meant, in theory at least, that shelters were no longer necessary. Most Americans stopped building bomb shelters until September the 11th, 2001. Director John Goheen went underground to see how Americans are once again thinking the unthinkable in Give Me Shelter.
In the middle of the Nebraska Panhandle, surrounded by windswept prairie, there is a home where every feature spells unique.
Hal, are you feeling well today?
I feel great and I am ready to fulfill your every command.
And here's our bathroom. We're actually using the existing bathroom. My husband calls this the Family Conference Center.
Activate surround sound system.
When Don and Charlene Zwanitzer bought this place, it took a little imagination to see what was hidden here.
When we moved in, it was preoccupied by the pigeons. We actually bought the property from the salvagers, but they left many openings in the building so that it was possible for the pigeons to come in, and there was even some stray cats that made it in here over the time.
I took out 2 closets that were over here and the wall that was across here, and they had lowered ceilings.
Transforming a house from fixer-upper to dream home is a familiar American theme.
It took us about 2 years to do the renovations. It took 9 months of cleaning and then another 9 months just to make this into a house.
Hal is our voice automated helper who keeps track of motion in all the rooms. Each room does have a motion sensor.
There used to be a wall across here.
The Zwanitzers worked hard to create a home of distinction and comfort that the previous occupants wouldn't recognize. But then the last tenants had a different set of priorities.
Hal, launch the missile.
Well, this is our living room. It used to be the command center. There used to be a console right here.
Command Center is in an Atlas E missile complex decommissioned by the government in 1965. The front door opens to an underground bunker.
Keeps the big mosquitoes out.
The roof is 400 tons of rolling steel.
The nose of the missile was right next to the 47-ton door. Tail was down at the flame pit. The flame pit goes down and out.
And so the flame would have been forced to come up here. When we bought the site, it was just the concrete. And we put in all these metal shelves and the metal stairs.
That contained the guidance system for the missile.
The Zwanitzers have stocked their underground house with enough food and supplies to keep them and some of their closest friends out of the grocery store for some time.
We could probably sustain ourselves for easily a year, close to 2 years. We could probably put up 13 people for a year if we had to, worst case. It wouldn't be real fancy, but that's survivability, and that's what the goal was here. And I think we've attained that.
One of the main selling points this place had going for it was that it was bomb-proof. Nuclear bomb-proof.
The structure is extremely sound. It was designed to withstand a 1 megaton blast 1.6 miles away. It has 139,000 cubic yards of concrete.
This is the escape to the outside.
The Zwanitzers are part of a small group of people who believe there is no such thing as being too prepared. And while there aren't many people who can match this setup, every year there are more Americans doing something.
We moved in here in 1989. It's a pretty quiet neighborhood, so it's a fairly ordinary neighborhood. I'm about as ordinary a Joe as you can find anywhere.
In a number of typical American communities, there is more to the backyard than meets the eye. When Paul Seyfried wants to get away from it all, he doesn't go out to his backyard in suburban Salt Lake City, Utah. he goes under it.
So this has a vertical entrance.
In what used to be a 12,000-gallon fuel tank,
I could reasonably support 12 people in here.
Paul Seyfried has stocked enough supplies
I have a 120-day supply of water.
to ride out an extended emergency in his underground shelter.
I have enough electricity and stored in my batteries to go maybe 6 months if I use my electricity very carefully.
Seyfried says he's not a radical or survivalist. He says he's a realist.
I see myself more as an ordinary citizen who has taken the time to inform himself on some of the threats that can menace our society, and have taken those steps necessary to make sure that I can continue to support and protect my family.
Today, there is no second best for families' civil defense. The urgent need to prepare now against the threat of atomic warfare.
During the height of the Cold War, preparing for nuclear nightmare was part of the American experience. At the Nevada test site, nearly 1,000 nuclear devices were detonated over a 40-year period.
Household furnishings were installed in the houses. Mannequin families supplied by private industry are to represent Mr. and Mrs. America.
Buildings were constructed at varying distances from the blasts to test different types of shelter concepts and construction.
Yet, less than a mile from ground zero, a human being in a shelter should survive. Or will you, like a mannequin, just sit and wait?
Right now we're standing on top of this shelter. When this shelter was put in, it was designed to pretty well blend in with the landscape. In fact, it blends in so well that in this neighborhood, virtually none of the neighbors even know it's here.
But the Cold War has been over for more than a decade. So who or what is Peter Larson protecting himself against? He says it could be anything from a societal breakdown caused by an economic collapse to a global pandemic or a natural disaster.
There are also the terrorist threats. You know, if something were to go extremely wrong, if they got their hands on a nuclear weapon, whether it be a dirty bomb or something as simple as launching one on a Scud missile.
Whatever it is, Larson says he owes it to his family to give them the best protection he can provide.
I'll show you what we have under the floor. Again, this is a 10-foot diameter shelter. We have about 3 feet of space under the floor for storage.
Using a rotating sleep system, 18 people could stay here at one time, complete with most of the comforts of home, assuming your home is already gone.
Then we have this area. That would be pretty much our living quarters. We've got a TV. This system comes with this giant air filter. This filter is designed to filter out nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare agents.
For Paul Seyfried,
This one here is pretty close to being done.
having a shelter just makes good sense. It also makes good business for his shelter construction firm. And business has never been better.
We ship all over North America and into South America. We have had some inquiries about shipping to the Middle East and to Europe.
A standard 10-foot by 50-foot shelter with 2 entrances, blast doors, ladders, stairs, bunk beds, and an air handling system costs almost $50,000. But customers are not restricted to the super rich.
They're mostly just ordinary citizens who are just concerned for their family's welfare and safety and recognize that the government really has no intention of offering effective protection against WMD.
This is an 8-foot diameter tank, so we don't...
Al is one of those customers. He didn't want to give his last name, but he had no problem giving a tour of his shelter.
Here I have primarily canned foods because water is going to be a premium. So we store a lot of hydrated canned foods.
Al says he shared the cost of building his shelter with other families who would also get to use it in an emergency.
I have limited funds. I figured I have about as much invested in this as I would have an average new pickup truck. And so for a while I'm driving older vehicles until I can get things squared away. This is a kind of a priority. It's a Russian submarine clock.
Al calls his shelter an insurance policy, something you hope you never need, but something you'd be foolish to be without, especially in today's world.
Until the world is a safer place, this would be a wise and prudent thing to do for anybody.
After the September 11th attacks in New York and Washington, orders for home shelters jumped by about 50%. They jumped again after Hurricane Katrina. And after particularly traumatic events around the world, more people discover that protection is just a mouse click away.
We're exclusively marketing on the internet. We don't do any advertising anymore in published media.
But for Paul Seyfried, this isn't about exploiting media-driven fears. It's about his own family's safety and protection.
I can run those two lights for more than a year without recharging my batteries.
The idea of preparing for the kind of catastrophe that would require extended living in an underground shelter is something many Americans would rather not think about. But for members of America's shelter subculture, this is the height of civic and parental responsibility.
And my question is, why not? Why not go ahead and do it? What do you have to lose and what do you have to gain? And when you stop and think about the potential problems that can beset a civilization when things go upside down, you just don't want your family out there.
Building a shelter is only the first step. The next priority is to try and keep the neighbors from finding out. We'll explain why after the break.